Well, good morning still. How's your summit so far?
Good.
Good? Good? Thumbs up?
Good.
Welcome to Unlock the Potential of Audit. So who is using the audit module? All right. Who would like to implement the audit module at their company? Okay, so audit module is kind of like the great elusive unicorn of master control. It's the module that everybody is talking about, but not a lot of people are actually using it. And that's because it's pretty new to master control. We got audit module around version 10. That was the first version of audit module. And now in version 11, there is so much cool new stuff in audit that I had to increase the time in class from 2 days to 3. We had to add a whole new day to audit module training. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is some of, so it's called Unlock the Potential of Audit, but really what this course is subtitled is Katie's favorite stuff about audit module. Okay, so we're going to try and give you a little bit of an idea of what audit module can do so that when you do get ready to implement it, and I hope you do, you'll get to come to my class for 3 whole days of me, and then you will learn how to configure audit and how to use it effectively in your organization. But there are a couple of things that you kind of want to plan for ahead of time so that you know what to expect. But I want to give you an idea of some of the capabilities of audit. So we're going to talk a lot about how audit module talks to other modules in master control. So who's only using one master control module? Documents? Okay. Who uses docs and training? Docs, training, process module? So we already established nobody's using audit. Is anybody using anything else, like BOM or supplier? Okay. Maybe projects? Maybe not. Okay. All right. So is anybody using risk? Okay. Another unicorn of master control. Okay. It's one of our secondary modules that manages risk assessments. And in a bit, we're going to talk about adopting a risk-based audit approach. Okay. We're also going to talk about integrating solutions. So a lot of you are using QEM. Okay, and you want to integrate solutions like Kappa into your audit program. Okay. We're going to talk about suppliers. We're going to talk about studies for my clinical folks. Where's my clinical folks? Okay, a few of you. And I'm going to show you some new report template functionality because if you're an auditor, going out and auditing is the easiest part of your job, right? What's the hard part? Getting your report done, right? So I'm going to show you some things in audit module that, especially there's some new stuff in version 11 that really make compiling that final audit report a snap. Okay. All right, so let's start at the very beginning. As Julie Andrews said in Sound of Music, it's a very good place to start. Okay, so here's a map of the audit module. For some of you who use training module, you're used to all of the linking connections. Okay, some of you who don't use training module, this is a little bit more intense. Okay, in my regular classes, it takes us a day to configure. Okay, so there's a lot of moving parts to audit. Audit is built that way so that it gives you a little bit of flexibility. Okay, and what we do is we start with your findings. Okay, so you probably have, well, in almost every audit you do, you come out with findings. That's the point of auditing, right? Okay, so when we talk about findings in master control, a big part of your homework when you go to roll that out is standardizing that list of findings into kind of like a what could possibly go wrong in a facility list. What could I find in an audit? Are there document control problems? Are there training issues? Is there a housekeeping problem at this facility? Okay, so that's the basic building block of an audit when you're implementing audit as a module in master control. And that's because you need to report. Okay, you want to find trends. Does anybody do this manually now? Who has an internal audit program? Okay, and at the end of the year, you want to make a list of all of the training findings, right? Okay, that's why we ask you to kind of standardize those so that the verbiage is all the same. Makes it easier to report. Okay, out of your findings and what we call criteria, which is how you meet compliance through a standard, okay, we build a checklist for you. And it can be a standardized checklist or it can be nothing at all. It can just be a blank piece of paper for you to collect observations. Okay. So a checklist combined with a report template, because you want a standardized template, makes an audit. Okay. It's when you bring in the entity that you can say, I want to use my standard audit to audit a specific entity, such as a department or a supplier or a process or a system, like a quality system, okay, document control systems, or I want to, I can audit even a product in master control. Those entities are really flexible. But what we want you to do is establish a risk matrix. And this is a big part of the master control audit module, is determining what an entity's risk is. Okay, so let's talk about the risk audit connection for a moment. Okay, if you're all access, you have risk module already installed. It's a pretty easy implementation. Okay, so it integrates really well with audit because we like a risk-based audit approach. Okay, so you have an audit schedule, right? What is it, an Excel file? Okay, nobody's judging you. That's how we all do it. Okay, some of us have Outlook calendar reminders. Some of us, not really validated system, Outlook. Okay, so what we want you to do is instead of saying, when did I last audit document control as a department? Let's see if I can find a record, and maybe you have a record and you say, oh, it was 2 years ago, they're due. Okay, or sometimes it's 5 years ago and then you're way past due. Okay, you want to audit them regularly, but you want to do it with a risk-based approach. Okay, now we've all seen the risk matrix, right? It's got the squares that go up. It starts with green at the bottom, then there's a stripe of yellow and red at the top. Okay, so what we do in audit module is we establish a risk matrix. And based on an entity's risk, we say, if it's low, I want to audit them however often you want to audit. Okay, so in this example that I put up here, okay, a low risk process, I might just do a desk audit, okay, every 2 years. For a medium risk entity, I might audit every year, and I'm going to give them a standard full audit, which means I'm going to go look at their processes, I'm going to audit their documents, I'm going to come up with a formal report. Okay, or a high risk, I'm going to audit them every 6 months. Okay, now how do you establish that low, medium, high risk? Where's my risk mitigators? Okay, it's per your internal process. Okay, so if we take it in suppliers, let's talk about suppliers. Okay, the supplier who provides my active pharmaceutical ingredient is higher risk to my product than the supplier who sells me pencils and tape. Okay, so that's part of it. Criticality, Ryan says. Okay, that's a perfect example. Also, history. What's your history with that supplier? Okay, if 3 out of 5 lots that they send you are out of spec, okay, you might use your judgment to bump that up to a high, and that's going to schedule those audits for you automatically every 6 months. Okay, sends out the task, which is really nice, right? Because you don't have to plan it. You don't have to remember, I got to go to my spreadsheet this month. I'm going to send out 500 emails. Who's going to do this? That's all handled in master control, okay, based on what you configure. Okay? When you configure...
Was that the last screen? So
yeah.
Is that the info card based on the audit? So you can set up a number of different audits?
So it's a risk mapping. It's not an info card. It runs on a different mechanism than the info card.
Okay.
But what it does is it's a line that is drawn between. So if you look at this map, here's your info cards with the orange, right? Or burnt sienna, whatever that color is. Okay, and your risk mapping is what says this entity, so Bob's API, is high risk, which means they're going to get a standard audit every 6 months.
So you can have 20 different types of audit types, but they all just go through that risk mapping assessment, risk assessment.
Yep, perfect. Yep, they go there. They're all assigned risk here, and then also here through what's called a risk file. Now, if you have risk installed, and if you're all access, you have risk installed, you're going to need to go through a risk file. So that assigns the score. Okay, now a risk file is kind of like a file folder. Okay, audit entities is only one of the things that risk files manage in risk. You can have a risk file on a project, so you can keep all your risk assessments in that risk file, as well as your audits. Okay, you can keep a risk file on a supplier, okay, or on a clinical site. Okay, it's one component, but what it does is through this risk score that you assign here, okay, so you say Bob's API is a medium risk entity based on his past performance and his criticality to my process. So this is how the audit schedule is going to run. I put the raw material receiving process, pretty critical process, right? You've got to make sure you've got a certificate of analysis, make sure the drums are sealed. Okay, so I assign that a medium risk, which means per my risk mapping, I'm going to audit once a year. That's department internal, that process. Okay. All right. So not only does risk control the risk file, but you also have kind of a mini solution where you can do a risk assessment. Okay, you can do all kinds of integrations with process here, not just risk, but when you log all those observations, right? That's the output of your audit. It's observations. How do you respond to those? Sometimes you can just do a response, right? You can say, oh, we cleaned up the extension cords, and so it's no longer a safety hazard. Okay, but I know that Ryan's a stickler, and he says, no, not good enough. I need a documentation. I need a CAPA so that you can not only tell me the corrective action, you cleaned up the extension cords, but how are you going to make sure that those extension cords don't get strung across the hallway again, which results in a safety observation, right? So if you're using process module, you probably have a number of these processes running. The most common that I talk about in class is issue review, which is part of CAPA Advanced. Who's using CAPA Advanced? Okay? So if I say, here's my observation, they can then issue a CAPA to respond to that observation. Okay? What about SCAR, Supplier Corrective Action? Any SCAR people? Okay. Risk assessment was the one that I just mentioned. Okay. So since those are process pieces, okay, for your process module, my process module piece, okay, that actually runs through process. I know this is a little bit blurry right here. You have templates that go to a template mapping. Okay, so when you come to class, I draw this on the board. I don't have a pen, unfortunately, so I'll just, oh, brilliant. Okay. So the high-level overview of what happens in your master control system. When you're working through the interface here, you're working through the pretty front end of master control, web-based, right? what's happening is it's talking to a database. Okay, usually SQL. Some of you might have Oracle. What it's doing is it's filling out a table. Okay? So I'm filling out a table in my audit, and I say, I want this audit to talk to my kappa table. Okay? A database is really just a whole bunch of tables. Okay? So what we do when we establish a template mapping to process module from audit is we draw the arrow. That's what we're doing. We're saying this equals that. Okay, so this is just a slide of what this says. So I have templates and I have template mappings. That's how you get there. And it's going to take you to a screen that looks like this. Okay, it's a little bit intimidating at first, but once you know what it's doing, you feel better about it, right? Okay, so I have a source, which is master control audit. And then I go to a destination, right? Which is Form 48, which is SCAR in this case. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line from my audit observations. So what you'll do is scroll down in this list here, and you'll find the observation finding field, which is just a field in your audit workspace, and map it to a field in your form template. Usually the what. There's always a what, right, in our process forms. Okay, which means that when I issue an observation and I say I need some action further than just a response, okay, further than just your explanation of why it occurred, I need a corrective and a preventive action. Okay, I can issue an action task, okay, which is going to give me the ability to start another process. Okay, forms can be initiated directly from an audit observation. So depending on your business process, you can resolve observations using other processes. This is so you can close the audit, right? You're tracking the corrective action through another process. So therefore, you can close the audit depending on your business practice, of course. Okay? All right? So what this does in master control, this is actually, some of you haven't seen our cool new forms. They got a facelift. Okay, they're really pretty. How quality assurance nerds, okay? So what this does is it initiates, this is an issue review. It links it to my audit observation right here through a number. I can open it here, and it copies my observation statement to the issue statement of the issue review. So you don't have to copy and paste. Okay, so that's pretty cool, right? Now, that's part of closed loop quality management. Has anybody heard closed loop quality management? Some of us? Okay, I want to be able to trace within my quality management system. I want to be able to say, this kappa was a result of this audit observation, and here it is. Okay, that's a small loop. But it all links together, which is the advantage of a fully integrated quality management system, right? Okay, also on the audit, okay, this is a picture of the workspace. Okay. Did anybody go to Dustin's presentation yesterday on the audit module? Nobody? Okay. So the audit workspace is new to version 11. It's fully integrated. It's really slick. Okay. But what it does is it's going to link that issue review in right there. Okay, so you can see the issue review from the audit and the audit from the issue review. Yes, sir.
We're running version 10.
Okay.
How is this different from the solution package, the forms and the...
It's a lot more robust than the solution packages. The big thing for me is scheduling. It helps automate that schedule, and it helps deploy that risk-based approach. So it manages the risk of an entity.
Do you still have the link capabilities with the...
It depends on how you have that configured in the audit solution package. So there's some form before launching mechanism in the audit solution package where you can say this observation needs a kappa, or you can map it through there. But it just is, it's its own module, so you're going to see benefits to reporting and scheduling, as well as report issuance. This makes a nice, beautiful report at the end, based on a template that you can configure yourself. So those are the big ones. Okay. Just to show you a little bit more, I can track the task directly from my audit workspace. So here's my observation workspace. Okay. And I can track it right there. Okay. Let's talk about the supplier connection. Okay. Some of you might be using supplier already. I saw a couple of hands. Okay. Supplier is a pretty easy implementation. Okay, supplier is a module that helps compile and manage supplier documentation. So if you have a supplier certification program that you're trying to run on a spreadsheet, stop it. Stop it now. Okay. All right, so a supplier is given, as luck would have it, an info card in master control. Okay, this info card works like a file folder to hold information about that supplier. As a minimum, it says this supplier is certified to provide these parts or these raw materials to me. Okay, it contains their information as well. Okay, but you see this right here? Audit. Okay, if you've got to regularly audit your suppliers, okay, what it's going to do when you schedule an audit, okay, is it's going to ask you what's your entity type. You say this is in supplier module. So I can pull, the supplier here is widgets are us. That's for my med device people. Okay, and I'm going to use the standard audit. Okay, and this is one I'm going to go. Okay. So what it's going to do is send out that audit task. All right, and it's going to actually link that audit in here. So that supplier info card is getting a lot more use by integrating it with the audit module. An audit is a little more flexible, okay, because you can tell not only is what the supplier is certified to give you, but here's the last audit. Okay, and I can look up my supplier, widgets are us, and I can say, what's the audit history? It's right here, okay, in this list. Okay, I also can control the frequency at which I'm auditing. Okay, yeah.
Would the supplier info card also list the risk rating, like if we're giving it like a high, medium, or low?
Only when so it won't be on the supplier, it would be in the risk file. So the risk file would control that risk score. Okay.
Does it show anywhere in here what the risk is? What you have set it at?
It shows. I don't think I captured it. Okay, if you use supplier scorecard, that implements really nicely. I will give you a supplier scorecard score. It does not show the risk. That's a great enhancement request. Yeah?
So if you don't need the guest connect function in the supplier module, can you just use the audit module to manage your supplier audits?
Uh-huh. Okay, it can be either self-contained or you can implement it with the supplier module. Okay, the reason that I go over this now, we'll talk about that in just a second, okay, is because, okay, you can integrate this audit module and you can pull from supplier module, you can pull from the brand new studies module, or it can be self-contained in audit entities. So if you want to self-contain it in audit entities, you can do suppliers there as well. You don't get the added benefits of using supplier module, like that file folder that tells you what they're certified to send you. Okay, same thing with GCP Studies. Manages clinical practice information. So you could audit a study, and it would contain all that information within a study's info card. Okay, but you wouldn't get those other benefits. All it would do is manage your audit entity schedule. Okay, so there's a couple of choices. But what you want to do, if you want to use supplier, Okay, audit is a great time to implement supplier because they talk so well together. And if you're going to implement it, do it at the same time so that you don't have duplicate entities in there. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you that. Which one would you do first? And do the limits and resources. It's kind of like.
Yeah, I get it, right? Because you're only one person, or
Right.
sometimes some of us are lucky to be two people, right? So it kind of depends on what your plan is for your audit rollout. So if you're going to roll out internal audits first, okay, you can do audit first because your internal departments are going to be managed through the audit module. But if you're thinking about suppliers at a later phase of your project, you can implement it then. But if your first phase of audit is supplier audits, do supplier first. So it depends on your implementation plan. Does that make sense?
Sure.
path of least resistance, right?
Yeah.
But you kind of have to use the supplier module and the audit module to work as one to manage the supplier audits. You can't just use the supplier module itself to manage the audits.
You can use the supplier module by itself, but it would mean that your audits are managed in a paper-based system.
Yeah, so
Which
that's why,
might-
like, if
yeah.
you want the audit function to be electronically
Mm-hmm.
implement both of them anyway.
Yeah. And supplier, like I said, is a pretty easy implementation. It's a 2-hour WebEx for training. So that tells you kind of the inner workings of your system are fairly easy to manage.
You probably could just do audit and still manage your supplier audits if it was just audit. If you have another program or something else for managing their suppliers, you're still using Oracle,
Okay,
those types of things, but you can still manage at least the audit process for the suppliers through that.
right, in
Because you
audit.
can put separate categories and
Mm-hmm.
you can have suppliers as info cards
Right.
within the audit.
Right, an audit entity. Okay, so we've established some little groups here just because that's the way our modules are grouped. Okay, but an audit entity type. So you have an info card, it means you have an info card type. Kind of like I have an SOP type and I have 500 SOPs. Okay, you have an entity type, which is a type of entity, which means a department. That's a type of entity. Okay, a process is a type of an entity. A supplier is a type of an entity. Okay, a study is a type of an entity. So if you list out everybody that you audit, okay, I bet you can draw some circles, right, and say these are similar. They have similar risk scales. Okay, so that's a big part of your homework is making that list of who those entities are. You probably already have it. It's in your Excel spreadsheet. Okay? All right, so that's a big piece of your preparation. Okay, I have 10 minutes. I just got the warning sign because like the orchestra starts to play at the Oscars and you say, wrap it up, okay? So I wanted to show you this cool template functionality because it helps a lot of us solve a lot of problems. Okay, the hardest part for me is sitting down and writing that final report, right? Okay, I see all these heads going, oh, I've got 15 waiting at home, okay? So within your audit workspace, and if you want to see the audit workspace, I'm happy to walk you through it. Make an appointment at Genius Desk, and I'll walk you through that workspace. Okay. You have a Create Document button. Okay. Anybody use metadata integration, master control? Okay. It's really cool. Okay. What I do is I click the button, and I say generate a document from this workspace. In this case, I chose memo template because I wanted to show you that it pulls the metadata out of master control, lickety-split, and it creates a document. This is my announcement letter. I made this in master control. Okay? It's got my company logo, which is 3 penguins. Okay? And it pulled my supplier's name, Dear John Doe. Okay? That's the metadata that I put in there. Okay? And it pulled his address out of there. So I don't have to generate that letter by myself. Okay, master control can do it for you. it does the same thing with reports. Anybody issue like 2 versions of the same report, right? You have one that you send to the supplier. You have one that you route internally. Okay. So I always have to issue the default, which is my governing report, and it becomes the main file in my info card. Okay, it makes an info card, as luck would have it, in master control. Okay, it makes an info card, and you say, this is my draft report. Okay, but I can also issue a second version of that same report using the same functionality. It pulls all of those observations out of the workspace and makes a Word doc for you. Okay? All right. It makes one that becomes the definitive governing main file. Everything else becomes extra. Okay? But it is just really a Word doc here that pulls all of that information in together. It can even sort it for you, so the critical observations are at the top, and the less critical are at the bottom. Okay. All right. Do you guys have any questions? I'm sure you do. This is a 3-day class. It's hard to cover it in 40 minutes, right? Yeah.
So going back to one of the screenings you had at the very beginning with the standards, and as far as creating a checklist, how customizable is that in regards to the audit? Can I pull in standards or subsets of standards based on whatever I want to audit to and import that into my checklist as far as what I'm going to?
That's a very good question. A document control audit is very different from a lab audit. Is very different from a supplier audit. Is very different from a safety audit.
Well, my document control audit is going to depend on which agency and what standard I'm following, because I've got 4 different agencies.
Because you've got ISO, you've got 21 CFR, you've got all kinds of stuff. Okay, so this stuff feeds into here, into the checklist. So what we do is we create these several checklists and say, here's my CLIA audit, or here's my CAP audit. Here's my ISO audit, here's a safety audit list, and it pulls in different sets of standards so that you don't have a list of 500 standards in one checklist. It's just what you need for that audit. Okay, does that answer your question a little bit?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I'm scheduled for it.
Okay. Always learn to. Okay. So what you have, just to kind of sum it all up, okay? Audit module has a lot of moving pieces. Okay, you want to decide up front in order to get the most out of your audit module. Okay, when you do your project planning for audit module, I want you to decide what pieces you want to use. Okay, these are the required. You got to have a checklist. You've got to have a report template, and you've got to have an entity. Our powers combined makes an audit. Okay, so you want to decide what risk components you want to bring in. As a minimum, you need to decide a global risk mapping. Okay, so this is going to help you with that risk-based audit approach. A lot of people don't have this yet. Okay, that's okay. That's one of the goals of this system, is to help you implement it. Okay. So what risk pieces do you want to use? If you've got solutions, which ones are you going to implement with audit? Okay, and if you've got suppliers or studies to play with, then you want to bring those into. Okay, during what phase? Okay, if you want to audit suppliers immediately and you want to use supplier module, I recommend you do them at the same time, so that you don't have suppliers everywhere. Okay. All right. Yeah.
So what about implementing a risk supplier?
That's a little bit of a tall order, but it has and can be done. Okay, it depends on your resources and your time. Okay.
Which would risk with risk module and audit module, what would you recommend would be best to implement?
Depends on what your company's priorities are.
Yeah.
So risk module gives you risk management. It gives you a nice integrated solution where you can mitigate risk. The risk file you just implement with Audit because you have to, but it's only a piece of the risk module, so remember that. But these things that I've shown you here, the supplier info card is and the audit integration, okay, it's a piece of what Audit can do with supplier. Okay, they work together. Okay, I used to work for a company and they had every different kind of software, all of the newest stuff, but nothing talked to each other. So that's why this is a big win for me, especially with Audit, is because I want to say, okay, I need to know about the supplier. What do they sell me? What are they authorized to provide for me? And what's their audit history? Okay, what are their corrective actions that are out there? Okay, and then what's their supplier scorecard look like? Okay, you have a question?
Do all these modules operate under the same licensing?
It's all access licensing.
All access.
Mm-hmm.
What if you don't have all access? That only this module, that module. Are they separate licenses?
So you'll want to talk to your sales representative, and if you don't know who they are, let me know, and I can find out. And to find out what would be the best way to get those licenses.
So they do require licenses.
They do require a license. Everything's going to require some sort of license to log in. There's custom licenses. They are going to require a full license. So sometimes you can buy a la carte, depending on what your projected use of that module is. So let's get you in touch with Insights. Yeah. I don't think it does directly, but you can definitely link anything together. Okay. Yeah.
So aside from writing up the audit at the end, the most frustrating is also compiling other auditors into one report.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the ability within the audit to be able to set that up with an audit team?
Yes.
And divide tasks, and then it compiles all the data into one report?
In fact, your report goes into collaboration. So collaboration makes a cameo appearance in Audit module. So It's very cool. So I know this was very, very high overview. I wanted to give you an idea of how you can spread that Audit module out and use other functions within master control to truly get the most out of it. Okay, take your survey, either online or a paper survey. If you have questions, and I'm sure you do, I'm available after. If you want a business card, you're welcome to email me. Or I'm at Genius Desk. I'm here all week. Tip your waiters.